Hello, hello. Hello, I hope that everyone can hear me. I'm going to do a sound check. Testing 1, 2. Just doing a sound check. Give me just a second. Hello, I am here. I'm just checking my audio. If you're in the studio, let me know if you can hear me. Okay. I think I'm just going to keep going. I think the mic is working. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Long intro. I will include chapters so that you can skip to the beginning of the presentation or the beginning of the video. So thanks everyone for being here. I am going live today for Friday Office Hour, January 27th, 2023. And as the live is titled, I will be talking about collaborations as it relates to the success of early career researchers. So that means graduate students, postdocs, and junior faculty that have not been promoted to associate professor or who have not been granted tenure. All right, and so just as a disclaimer, I don't discuss Title IX issues on this channel. Please report any Title IX issues to the appropriate representative at your institution. And this is a space where we talk about intersecting issues that impact STEM folks with intersecting marginalized identities. All right, so before I launch into my visuals, I want to talk about why I want to talk about collaborations. Well, this is all important for tenure and promotion. So, as a faculty member, we, as early career or junior unpromoted faculty members, are working towards earning something called tenure, which is the ability to conduct research without fear of retaliation or being fired due to controversial viewpoints. And usually, professors can earn tenure by meeting a set of institutionally set benchmarks for productivity. Also, those benchmarks for productivity are weighed and are evaluated by people outside of that institution, but people that are in the field of that researcher. Some of the ways in which we're evaluated are our ability to positively contribute to research, both internal and externally, our ability to teach and teach effectively, and our contributions, our service contributions to the institution and to our professional organizations. Wrapped into all of that is our mentorship. So how we engage with graduate students, undergraduate students, etc. How we train our mentees, how we train, and just our ability to sustain an appropriate level of productivity in all three areas: research, teaching, and service. More recently, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been added as a merit and promotion criteria in some institutions. And so that's a fourth area in which we're evaluated for our level of productivity and contribution to our roles as professors. Okay, and so why am I here? Well, for one, when it comes to the research category, if you work at an R1 institution or an institution that has a heavy weighting on research, when it comes to being evaluated for promotion and tenure, then collaborations and how one goes about collaborating is really, really important. Okay. And this is not something that I necessarily intentionally thought about when it comes to how I spend my time and which projects I pursue. I like to do and participate in research projects that are interesting, relevant, push boundaries, and that involve a pretty supportive team of researchers. Those are really my criteria. The conundrum of it all is when it comes down to being evaluated for promotion and tenure, because that's when the bean counting starts. And by bean counting, I mean the people that are evaluating one's file will determine whether or not those contributions, those research contributions, reflect the researcher or the principal investigator's ability to carry out independent work, right? The whole point is they want to make sure that professors can carry out independent work without help or intervention from any previous advisors. And so how you choose to collaborate, what you work on, who you choose to work with, it all matters. And so I was inspired to post a tweet. It's currently pinned to my Twitter profile. I can link the thread in the description box at the end of this live. Essentially, I wanted to know what's the benchmark for success? What do we do in an age where sponsors are really funding more team science? They are funding large collaborations and large research centers. So how does a junior faculty member manage their time? How do they manage relationships that are pretty highly dependent on collaborative work? All right. So here's the tweet. I said earlier this week, I said, research sponsors are funding more team science, and it can be appealing for junior faculty to join these teams. However, merit or promotion and tenure review evaluates productivity based on individual or lead contributions. And then I posited that these two practices are in direct conflict. Senior faculty care to weigh in. So this is me throwing out a Hail Mary to just see what other people think, to see if other people are struggling with this team science versus independent work. So I posed a question, and I just want to start out by saying that I'm really grateful because a lot of people chimed in, or a lot more than I expected. And I found the responses to be measured. I thought they were honest. I thought everyone was responded with respect and candor, and I'm grateful to them, to these faculty for weighing in. A lot of people are skittish about giving out advice, especially publicly, for whatever reason. And I guess it's because there is a history of vagary around what it takes to get promotion and tenure. So this channel seeks to break down some of those barriers for those of us that don't have people in our lives to tell us the truth. Not me, I have people, but I just wanted to have the conversation out loud. So I hope you all can see this. So one of the first responses I got was from actually a faculty in my field, and Professor Kappa says, at the UCs, which is the University System of California, the contributions statements can carry a lot of weight internally, as does the candidate's statement, to put your work and your efforts in context, especially where you've taken leadership roles in team science. Not perfect, but I've found it helps a lot. Yeah, so I liked this. It was really helpful. So Professor Kappa is referring to the candidate statement, which what we call at Berkeley, we call it a self-statement. So you can actually take room in the self-statement, which is a summary of everything you've done, to enumerate what the leadership roles that you've taken within a larger collaboration. So essentially the advice here is that if you're going to do team science, make sure to clearly state in the candidate summary what you did in that collaboration that you led, and I'll add that it should be pretty clear that it's your unique contribution. The next response I got was from Professor Expert, and they say, yes, it's so important in your tenure statement to articulate your contributions to collaborations so people don't default to wrong assumptions. Use those I's versus we statements boldly when it comes to promotion and tenure so your leadership in your area's aspects is unmissable. That works wonders. So in less than 300 characters, she really says a mouthful. First of all, she talks about articulating contributions so that people won't default to wrong assumptions. So this was a nice way of saying not everyone gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to listing their collaboration or their collaborative research activities. The data suggests that when it comes to certain work, it is often assumed that the males did more than they actually did, and that the women, the females, did less than they actually did. So the contribution can be underestimated for people with marginalized identities and overestimated for people with non-marginalized identities, especially in STEM. I can pull resources if you want for that. So I'd say, especially for those of us that are historically undercited, under recognized, or just not always given proper attribution for our work, the contribution statement is absolutely critical. Okay, because the assumption is going to be that someone helped us along the way. The intellectual contribution should be given to someone else, when oftentimes we show up as, or we end up being hidden figures in our own work and erased from our own work. The second part of this says use I versus we statements. So this is important. Along our careers, we use different pronouns, or we use different different verb tenses, whatever, in our writing. So what I can remember being taught, like in high school, when it comes to non-technical writing, it's always third person. Then when you get into writing personalized essays to get admission to college, then you start writing in the I. So personal essays are I, and then non-technical writing is usually third person. And you're very removed from that. No yous, no I's. But then in research journals or technical writing or research articles, it's a mixed bag. When I first started writing research articles, I would use third person, no I in the writing at all. But I recently started using first person in journal articles to indicate we did this, because it's active voice. And apparently constantly being forced to write in third person is passive voice. And it's, some people find passive voice to be annoying. And so because we're trained against using first person in our technical writing, you tend to take that same approach in contribution statements and in statements that summarize your own research contributions. So you have to flip it again. You have to go strictly to the first person when you're writing up research contributions, when you're getting evaluated for merit, promotion, and tenure. So strange. So it's like taking ownership for the work. Very good. The next response is from Professor Haas, who's in environmental engineering, but not really in my field. So he says, as a former longtime department head, I always encouraged junior faculty to assemble a record demonstrating that they could do both strong team science as well as individual PI work, diversity in the portfolio. So I found this to be helpful as well. So Professor Haas identified himself as a former department head, which is important. That means this person, and I know there's other department chairs in this thread as well, but that means that he is indicating that he has seen a lot of merit and promotion and tenure files over the course of his time as a department head. So essentially, he's saying do both. Be able to put together a research portfolio that indicates that you're able to do strong collaborative work as well as lead your own work as an individual PI. So that was good to hear, because what it means is that the time you spent putting effort into work that someone else is leading is not in vain. And I actually responded to every comment in this thread, but I pulled up this particular response to Professor Haas. Thank you. So a bit of both. Any suggestions on the percent split between the team versus individual? I'm an engineer. I like numbers. I'd like to know specifically how much work should we do as a collaborator versus the individual. Okay. And so Professor Haas responded, I've never been pushing a particular quantitative split, but rather one that amasses evidence that they can work in both modes with success. Okay, so this was a really nice generalized statement. And so just enough evidence, right? And so I I appreciated the response. I was hoping for a number, but just enough to demonstrate evidence. And I'm going to assume that that points to quantity. So how many papers have you published? I'd say the research portfolio or the number of papers has to be in the double digits. At least every tenure file I've had the pleasure of sitting in on the review for, there were double digit papers. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. And so you can do the split in your mind about what's individual versus what's collaborative. All right, this is the next response I'm going to go over from Professor Avila. It says, at a research university, you should show that you are or have the potential to become a leader in your field. For this, you need excellent papers with you as last author and first author from your lab. So maybe split 70-80% your own ideas, 30 to 20% collaborative question mark. All right. So once again, in very few characters, there's a lot of information here that can be really helpful. Now, the first part is show that we're potential or are leaders in the field. Yeah, and so by leader in the field, it means that you are expert in whatever it is you're doing. People are citing your work to learn more about that area. People are inviting you to give talks about that research area. You're getting awards for work in that area. That demonstrates leadership. So invitations, citations, awards. The next part, excellent papers with you as last author and first author from your lab. So boom, if I could like highlight any response in this thread, that sentence right there, that second sentence is the one that I think all junior faculty need to just latch on to. Excellent papers. You're the last author, first author from our lab. Strong, there's some implications for that. First, excellent papers, high impact factor journals. Okay. That's a clear indicator that it could be an excellent paper. You can beg to differ. Highly cited, okay, and also one that is a paradigm shifting paper. So it may not be in a high impact factor journal, but it's paradigm shifting and it changes the way people operate in your field. All right. Last author, you as last author. So oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations about where we as researchers should end up in the author list. Well, if you are going up for promotion, you need to be last author on a number of your papers. All right. So most of the people that I follow and engage with on Twitter are in STEM. So if you're in STEM, you need to be last author on your paper and hopefully corresponding author, if not your trainee being corresponding author. First author from your lab, okay? So the trainee needs to be the first author, all right? So hopefully the trainee as first author has done the majority of the writing and the data analysis. So what's not specified here is who should be corresponding author. And I feel like that's field specific. So when I was in grad school, my advisor let me be corresponding author on all my papers. He was just simply he had a lot of students. So we took the responsibility and we were corresponding author. When I worked in a chemical engineering department, I noticed that most people's PI was the corresponding author. And so what's the point or what's the big deal? Well, the corresponding author is the person that handles the correspondence with the journal. So that's the person that maybe packages everything together and submits it, makes sure that all the journal submission requirements are met. And so these are important. This is important. All right. To signify, one, that we're leading the work, And number two, that we can train others to be subject matter experts as well. So if we are, as PIs, as junior faculty, are constantly the first author, it probably indicates that we're leading most of the work and we're doing the writing. But we, as faculty, are evaluated on our ability to build or help instill good research practices into our trainees. That's our purpose, and it should be reflected in the author list. And so the last part is maybe a 80% versus 30-20% split for your own ideas versus collaborations, respectively. So I respect this. Okay. So I made sure to check out which field this person is in, and they are working as an engineering professor. So I'm going to be completely honest. I've heard the exact opposite from someone else. I've heard 30% your own, 70% collaborative. And so I really want to say that Professor Haas's advice about the split and not generalizing about percentages is probably safe because people get tenure with any range of split between collaborative and individual contributions. All right, next. The next response was from Professor Filippelli. I found that, and this person works in climate research, and I thought it was great advice. Senior faculty weighing in with only my own personal experience, not a grand lecture of the state of the field. Team science is how things get done. I wish he would have put a period. Period. Junior faculty need to be at the head of the team for the maximum promotion and tenure benefit. Make sure that mic's on. But I have seen many do well with semi-solo science. I'm not really sure what semi-solo science is, but there it is. So people in climate, so that's the geosciences, some of us in engineering, team science is how things get done. And I think that's discipline specific. So especially for us modelers, if you're a modeler out there, we're definitely doing team science because usually we have to rely on people that make Earth observations and they give it to us and then we run models. And so I'd say people in my field, team science is the way to get things done. Here's the caveat. Junior faculty need to be at the head of the team for maximum promotion and tenure benefit. And I feel like this is so loaded. I feel like this is the statement that will cause the most conflict in most of our journeys. So how much time do you spend on team science that you're not the leading person on? Okay, if you're worried about promotion and tenure benefit. I don't have an answer for this. The conflict that comes into my mind is that when it comes to team science and the grant opportunities that fund that, they're usually in the multiple hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in grant funding. And the reputation for sponsors who give away that type of money is that they don't give it to junior faculty members. They just don't. Unless the person has a long record of research experience before they became a faculty member, like if they were at a national lab or a research institution. But I was told over and over again that junior faculty don't get grants where they're the PI of multi-million-dollar centers or collaborative projects. So in fact, like that's kind of impossible. All right. It may be impossible. If you're lucky enough to get a multi-million-dollar collaborative grant as a junior faculty, congratulations. You'll likely get tenure because you'll be the last author on many of the papers that come out of it. But the saving statement of this tweet is, I have seen many do well with semi-solo science. And so there you go. So just because you don't have a multi-million-dollar grant that you're a PI on, doesn't mean that you're not going to get tenure, right? So semi-solo could be you and one other collaborator, or you and someone else's student and your student, right? It doesn't have to be a huge 20-person team. Okay, here's a response that I thought was useful because it provided some tangibles. This is from Professor Berry. Also, I think this person is in STEM. Professor Berry says, agree. I think key is independent research, i.e., I decided to join this team. As part of this team, I gained X. Within the team, I contributed Y and led Z. So, thank you, Professor Berry. This person has provided the language that we use in our contribution statements. I decided to join this team. All right. Or, for example, I decided to get on this DOE. I decided to join this Urban Integrated Field Lab team. As part of this team, I'm gonna do a live example for me with this statement. I decided to join the Urban Integrated Field Labs team. I gained experience with working in a huge interdisciplinary team that reached across campuses, a national lab, and many different scientific disciplines. Within the team, I contributed my expertise in personal exposure and community vulnerabilities, and I actually led the UC Berkeley portion of the subaward. Okay, I like that, and this is true. that grant didn't get funded, but this is how I would write that in my contribution statement. So thanks, Professor Berry. The second part of this says, my university encourages use of credit, that tool, and you can go find that, to define roles on papers, which I think helps. And so someone has been innovative enough to come up with this tool. I've never used it. Be sure to check it out. I took a look at the website, and it gives you nomenclature for the different roles that you can play in a paper or in a grant. But I think most of us have seen those roles, if not some or a subset of those. We've seen a subset of those when it comes to defining author contributions, which a lot of journals make you do. So thanks, Professor Berry, for providing tools and language along that is helpful in this conversation. All right. Professor Scrabalac said, when discussing such cases, I always ask myself if the team would be successful without the individual, or how easily the individual could be replaced by another person. It is often quite clarifying about the person's unique qualifications and scholarship. This is also really, really useful here. I like this. I'll make an aside and I'll say that this is actually how I determine author contributions for my papers. So in that person's absence, would the paper be what it was? Or would the grant be what it was? Did they make a contribution so strong that in their absence, the work would be completely different? So I guess it's the same thing here that they're evaluating when it comes to our collaborative work. If they take us as a researcher or as a collaborator out of the picture, would it be the same? Or are we easily replaced? Is our intellectual property, is our knowledge so mundane and so trivial or so obvious that anyone could do it? I think that's what they're evaluating in our promotion and tenure cases. That is what we call a unique contribution to the field. All right. Next, I want to go over Professor Baccarelli or Baccarelli. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. Professor Baccarelli is in public health, I believe. So Important for the exposure world. I know that the public health world has different requirements for tenure, but I tend to work alongside them. So I just find it interesting to know what some of their tenure requirements are. So Professor Bacciaretti says, the way I look at it is that team science is the launching pad into leadership for early career scientists. Working on a team that supports your growth and wants you to lead the science in your area is key! Exclamation point. Okay, this is another one that's pretty loaded and loaded with good advice. So, professor states that team science is a launching pad. Yeah, it is. Like if you get involved in the right collaboration, it can really take your career off, right? So, but what that requires is that you have a strong network and have people within that network that are willing to invite you to be part of the team. All right. So really, or you're just doing super stellar semi-solo science that people just want to bring you in. And what happens on these big collaborations, you get to know the other people and then they want to work with you and then you spin off an idea. So I think the spin-offs from these collaborations can be pretty neat as well. And so I'm going to throw in a plug for the postdoctoral research position. So I've seen cases where people come from smaller programs and then they join a group as a postdoc that is highly collaborative, and then they just launch. Contributing author to all the papers, like developing collaborations that last for decades. I think that's why it's important to be strategic about where you choose to work after grad school. If you want to go I'm not going to talk about postdocs here. I think there's other scientists on YouTube that talk about postdocs, but then the second part of this is really important. Working on a team that supports your growth. So in my experience, teams that support your growth include people that actively talk in the language of supporting junior faculty. They say things like, we want to make sure that you have proper authorship on this. We want to make sure that you have a supplemental funding for this work. We want to make sure that you can support a student on this work. Here's the funding for the work. Here's summer salary for the work. Tangible, non-performative support. Also, support collaborations that are supportive will also say, hey, I think you need to pull back here because you need to focus on your individual contributions. That's also support. What I find to be unsupportive is when people want to pull you into projects without a discussion of how that's going to help or hurt you as a junior faculty member. Because what I'm seeing in my experience is that my time, this is my left on the camera, my time is going from here to here. As I get further along in my career, I have more students, I'm managing more grants, I have more service responsibilities. So I don't really have a lot of time. And so the time that I'm spending needs to be spent wisely and on things that are meant to be like, help me be a shoo-in for promotion. So what's going on in my mind right now is, if I'm being invited to a collaboration, are they talking the language of support for junior faculty? So start thinking about this now, because I used to just go based on my heart and like, I want to do this work. It's so nice. And I rarely had these conversations. Of course I thought about it. I'm like, okay, am I going to need a paper out of this? But my role and being intentional upfront about what comes out of the collaboration, I think I could have done a better job of. All right. And the last part is they want you to lead your science. So the best experiences I've had with this are where people pull me into a collaboration and they say, hey, we want you to focus on your expertise within this work, you can lead it. And for me, that means I'm going to be able to write the papers and lead the papers for my work. Where this breaks down is where someone comes and asks you to contribute to their work and you're only contributing like a data set, which usually doesn't indicate leadership in the work unless you spin off your own science ideas. Okay? So unless you're able to work on your expertise within a collaboration, I'd say don't do it. As a modeler, I have to be careful because like I don't want to talk about it. We'll talk about it later. All right. So Professor Bastarelli was really, really active on the thread, and I really appreciate him. He also says, down the line, when it comes to tenure, your institution will evaluate how much of your work hinges on you. They will ask themselves, is this person replaceable? If they leave, how much, including money, are we losing? Right. So the first part of this tweet mirrors what someone else said. All right. How much of the collaborative work would have been done in your absence? Right? How much are you bringing to the table that is unique, undeniably unique? All right. Are you replaceable? All right. How many of you are in the field? I won't get specific about disciplines, but I can think of a few that there are a few replicates. All right. Who else does what you do? If you're the only one in the country, in the world that's doing what you do with your expertise, then your security of employment or likelihood thereof is high. And so even in my like naive world or short time as a faculty member, anytime people ask me about, oh, what do you do? How do you get noticed on the job market? Do what other people are not doing. If you're the same as someone else they've seen over and over again, you're never going to get hired. How much money are we losing? Okay. I thought this was really brave to say. This is important because a lot of institutions and like departments like to tell you, oh, it isn't like your funding doesn't matter. We're not worried about funding. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. How on earth are you going to sustain a research group if you can't support your students? Right? Sorry, I'm getting a little frustrated. So like you sustain a research group by being able to fund tuition, stipends, equipment, supplies to get the research done. And in order to do that, you have to get grants. Like, I don't think I've ever heard of a case where people didn't get tenure because they didn't raise any money. It's usually because they weren't productive and they didn't make any outputs, like they weren't writing enough papers. But institutions care about how much money you raise because guess what? There's something called overhead that's raised on those grants that goes directly to central funding. So one of the ways that you can make yourself valuable is to be a good grant writer. The next part is, I spoke about this by chance with a friend who is a psychologist. Yo, when I read this, I was like, thank you. Yo, this is going above and beyond. Seeking outside opinions, seeking outside help. She mentioned that the concept of interdependence in between independence and dependence, she said that this is what we should strive for. I like this. So we should be striving for interdependence as researchers, not people that are on an island by themselves that shut out everyone and shut out any opportunities for collaborative work, but also not people that are super dependent on anyone else, meaning you're not managing any of your own grants, you're dependent on other people for funding, you don't submit your own papers, so that's dependence. And so the middle ground between the two is what we really should be striving for as scientists and engineers. I told you Professor Baccarelli was really, really active, and I appreciate that. They said it is also important to work with senior colleagues who appreciate and publicly recognize your role. No hidden figures over here. One will also need to have last author papers. Okay, so once again, making sure you're in the last author position on these collaborative papers. So it is important. And so if people aren't, I'm sorry, if people aren't actively talking to you about your position on the papers, they don't care. So it is important to have that, discuss that. If there is no room for that, one needs to find another team. Professor Baccarelli is saying, come correct or don't come at all. I'm going to leave that as is. So you figure out what your boundaries are. Figure out if you're willing to walk away if people aren't giving you the support you need on them authorship lists. All right. So the next one from this person, this was in response to somebody that said you need to be a leader. This person said, you don't necessarily have to be a leader, but you can carve out a niche. I think, I don't know. I don't even know if you can carve out a niche and not be a leader. I guess you can be doing niche work and no one cites your papers and no one engages with their stuff. So I guess, and no, you're not getting recognition or awards for the work. I guess that is the situation where you've carved out a niche and you can publish a lot, but you're not necessarily a leader and your work isn't inspiring other people to change their research ideas. The rest of it says, we don't make it into fancy pants journals often because what we do is considered specialized. So I think what they're saying, and what I find to be true, is that for quote unquote fancy pants journals like Science, Nature, Cell, these journals tend to they tend to print papers that have broad appeal and things that, and that means it's appealing to all fields, right? Hot topics like climate change, cancer, environmental sustainability, things like that get into Science, Nature, Cell. If you're really specialized and only like a handful of people are going to appreciate and or cite your work, it's oftentimes we have to submit to specialized journals or journals with lower impact factors. But we've done a darn decent job in the areas we've touched, right? A darn decent job means quantity and quality, right? The work is recognizable, it's highly cited, award-winning work, inspiring work, and people are riffing off your work, generating ideas based on that work, etc. Okay. And the last part of this conversation, and I want to once again thank everyone who contributed to the Twitter thread. I'll try to make myself bigger here. Okay. These are the best practices that I think I learned from just the summation of all my experiences and then reading through the Twitter thread. Number one, get some funding for the work if you're doing collaborative research, if possible. If it's possible, right? So closed mouths don't get fed. If someone's asked you to do some work with them, say, hey, is there any funding for this? Is there opportunity for a sub award? Is there opportunity for like one-off collaborative stipends? So this is important, not because you're greedy. It's because it's enumerating. You're able to list this in your CV under funds that you've raised for your research. It counts towards your research productivity and sustainability. Sometimes the only thing that you're going to get out of a collaboration is a paper. But if it's a high profile paper, I'd say go for it. Number two, also, like most of the times, if you're a faculty member, a junior faculty member, you're 3-4 years in, your student is doing all the work mostly. And the worst thing is for you to put your student on a project where they're splitting their time across two projects, but only being funded from one. Not only is that like a conflict of commitment, but it's not fair to your student. Number 2, determine protocol for authorship attribution in the beginning. So although I didn't really put this into practice, I think this could be useful. I know a person that like has written agreements that get signed, or I know several people that have written agreements about who gets what position in the authorship list before any work begins. That could be useful. Number 3, be transparent and honest about your expectations, limitations, and boundaries, right? So expectations, okay? For the amount of work you're asking me to do, I expect to get this type of authorship, or I expect to be this position, or is this possible? You can talk about these things. If people are like uncomfortable with this, then like they really don't understand the climate of getting tenure as a junior faculty in 2023. Limitations. Limitations means I only have this amount of time to dedicate to this per week, per month, per year. Is this okay? I have been given some advice in my merit review that I need to pull back from collaborations. Can we circle back next year? Right? My time for collaborations is limited. Can we push this off? Right? Boundaries. Yeah. Boundaries you kind of have to put in place after the fact, really. Not really, but boundary setting when it comes to collaborative work is pretty much saying, no, I'm not going to work on XYZ in this fashion. So you can figure out what your boundaries are. But I feel like establishing expectations in the beginning will help you avoid having to have really hard boundary conversations later on in the collaboration. Last but not least, do both and do them both well, right? So do both, I mean, do collaborative and independent work and do them both well. That's what I learned from the Twitter thread. And I can say with, a fair amount of confidence that I'm on my way to doing those things. But I hope that any junior faculty member that's listening to this live is inspired or informed about what I discussed today. Because I promise you, this is the conversation that trips everyone up. That is usually had behind closed doors. I don't know why. Like, what is the big deal? It's probably because every department, every university is different, and they're going to value things differently for different reasons. So let me take this off. And so that's all I really have to say about collaborations. I do want to provide some disclaimers that really at this stage, as junior faculty, early career folks, I'd say for the early career folks, the rules may not be as tight as what I just discussed. For people that are junior faculty members, it's do or you know what, it's put up or shut up. So I think being careful about our collaborations as junior faculty members is important. As a disclaimer, I'd say as junior faculty, if we aren't told by someone in leadership in our department, this is what you need to do to get tenure, then we should be taking a weight of evidence approach to figure out what's required. Meaning, look at what everyone else has done that got promoted before you, evaluate that with your best knowledge, and then talk to your mentors about what you think, right? If the people in charge aren't giving you specifics about merit and promotion. The other thing I've learned is that I think people sue institutions when merit and promotion or when promotion cases are unfair and unlawful. So it's important for you to pay attention. I'm not going to sue, but it's important for you to pay attention to whether or not the practices are fair that are being taken to evaluate your files. All right. Did this person get tenure for the same thing you did and they're denying you? And you got to be honest with yourself. How many papers did you write? How much money did you raise? How many students did you produce? Did you get any awards? Do people know who you are? Did you make good contributions to the field? Did you provide professional service to your organization? Like, would people miss you if you're gone? So that's really all I have to say about merit, promotion, tenure as it relates to collaborations. If I missed anything, please put comments in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It is a labor of love. And I wish everyone the best as they traverse their tenure journey. Bye.